Welcome back to Chris and Retro. We got a different format here today. We had some technical issues connecting, but I have a friend of mine on, Marissa Hurst, that I wanted to talk to you guys about. We discussed it earlier in the week about coming on this weekend, and she's got a great story. We met as fellow ambassadors with the organization Shatterproof. I believe, Marissa, the first time we connected was in Dallas, right? Is that where we first?
Yes,
Yeah.
at the American College of Emergency Physicians.
Yep.
Yeah,
So we were on a panel with some pretty smart people. They were
very.
we were talking about stigma in the emergency department and our observations based on our interaction with healthcare and our times of addiction and active use and the variety of things that have gone through. And I can say honestly, out of all the people I've met in recovery, you hear a lot of tough stories, and it's hard to
Right.
rival Marissa's story. And so I wanted to bring her on here. And she's also been somebody that I consider very positive and a joy to be around. And I've been around quite a few people as we've gone here. So I just really wanted you guys to get a chance to meet her, hear her story, and some of her perspectives on it. So welcome to the show, Marissa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
So when we first met, you weren't married. You got married since we met, and that was
Right.
was several years ago in Dallas.
Yeah,
So
it's probably about 4 years ago. Yeah.
so before we went live here, I figured out what her new last name was, so that's helpful.
Right.
Started with that. But I want to get going here on some of your background. You've got a pretty extraordinary background and some of the decisions you had made and some of the things that were going on. But if you could give my audience a sense of what your background was as a characterization, and then we'll get into some of
Mhm.
the things you've dealt with in healthcare.
Oh, right. So I was drinking alcohol and doing just kind of like normal teenager things since I was 16. But I later on became just uncontrollably drinking all the time. I drank at work. I did that up into my 20s. And then I had a freak kind of just tennis accident and broke my ankle playing tennis. And I required hydrocodone. So I was prescribed that for about, I'd say 6 months or so, and became instantly addicted to it just because I could switch over from alcohol over to pills immediately. And so I could hide it easier. It was just great for me, but can't really get pills as easily as you can alcohol. So I ended up, once that ankle healed, I ended up trying to find a way to get more drugs. Tried to break anything I could by punching walls, things like that. But I ended up breaking my leg by jumping off the roof of my house. And
That's the one I've actually told my son about how addiction can be so baffling. Yeah, it's like, you
did
think
you really?
what people think that addiction is just like this choice all the time, and it is not. I mean, if you're so desperate
Right.
to jump off a roof to break your leg to get pain medicine, that says you're in a pretty desperate place.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, because I couldn't even just jump, like I scooted to the edge of it and I was like, there's just no human way possible for me to just do this. And so I was like, trick yourself by scooting to the edge of the roof. And so just kind of like slip off. Yeah. But I ended up having to get screws in my ankle. Yeah. But I mean, I got prescribed hydrocodone, of course, but that healed actually quite quickly. And that habit was really expensive. I was married at that time. I ended up getting pregnant, and for about that year, I was pregnant about a year and a few months after my daughter was born. I was off of everything, but as soon as she was born, I went right back to it, and then I couldn't afford it and went straight to heroin, anything opiate mostly related, or just anything I could do for the most part. But I did that for about 3 years and got a infection that spread to the lining of my heart, and I required a heart surgery on my tricuspid valve, and that was completely repaired with a pig's valve. I was in the hospital supposed to be 6 weeks. Of course, I check out 1 week early and go right back to using drugs. The people I was hanging out with were Skyping me and Skyping me them doing drugs while I was in the hospital. And I even had them sneak me in drugs. I was shooting up in my port. And so that was pretty bad. So that you can't do when you have a PICS valve.
Yeah, exactly. So back up for 1 second, you were actually able to get a valve though. So you were actually, so when you had probably myocarditis, right? Is that what caused your heart failure?
I had endocarditis.
Endocarditis. I mean, so endocarditis, you had to get a valve replacement, and they did give you the valve
Mhm.
replacement. Okay, so that's extraordinary
Yes.
rare in and of itself, because that's
Right.
hard to even get on a list. So that, I mean, you had chances to kind of, to get moving
Oh,
forward.
right.
And so,
They offered even like, did I want a mechanical valve or a pig valve? They even offered me, hey, this might last you longer, but you're gonna have to get this. But are you gonna use drugs again? No, absolutely not. Why would I ever use drugs again? I'm having heart surgery and I'm 30. Are you crazy? And I meant it. You're gonna hook me up to a lie detector test, and I was
that's
telling
the
the
thing.
truth.
That's the thing, is you do mean it. Like you genuinely mean it.
Absolutely.
You're 100% committed. You see all the baffling nature now. You're thinking clearly. You don't want to go back, and yet you find yourself back.
Yeah.
So what was that
Less than 5 weeks. Yeah.
So what was
Yeah,
that
less than
about?
5 weeks out there. I'm sorry. It was it was honestly just it was very defeating. Mostly it was just because my family was there in the ER with me and the emergency room and stuff like that whenever I had the surgery. So it was kind of like they were getting back on my side, and they're like, "We're trusting with you and believing you that you're going to do it." And I'm looking at them like, "Are you crazy? Like what? I'm having heart surgery. There's no way, but I didn't have any resources anywhere to go after that. No one's going to just let me move in with them.
Mhm.
So I ended up going right back to where I was living.
So you have, yeah, that oftentimes happen. I mean, we burn every bridge.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
especially when it gets so desperate. I mean, people have more than had it with us at that point.
absolutely.
And so then when you actually are sincere, it's hard for them to believe that this is really the
Right.
time. I mean, yeah, it's hard for them not to see that, okay, well, the heart valve didn't even stop, now she still needs help. So, it's like, but
Exactly.
you weren't quite there yet. If you'd gotten help, maybe that would
No.
kind of avoid that next run. But they do say,
Right.
I guess for you in your life, how influential were these people, places, and things they warn us of? I mean, were you weren't strong enough really to avoid it, it sounds like at that point.
Right. That's actually just a great question because it's the people mostly, I think, that are just they're a part. They're not, I don't want to say they're a part of the problem because they're not, but they're a part of what's going on. And so you need them. Like you need them in some way, no matter if it's someone close, if it's a medical worker, whomever. But they're the ones who really are playing probably the biggest role in your recovery, just because you just, honestly, it's just someone to say you're doing okay today, or are you okay, or being accountable to somebody. Just those are the biggest things that changed and affected every direction I would go, is just, what somebody else's control they had over my life, essentially.
Right. So for you, your story has so many twists and turns. I mean, I've heard a couple angles of it because you and I presented on a couple different panels together.
Hmm.
And I've heard a couple, some very involved, in-depth discussion around your addiction. But I think it's fair to say that you had a very painful journey, is probably fair to say. You know,
Probably, yeah. I think people definitely look at or hear my story and go, "Oh my gosh, that's the worst story I've heard." Which unfortunately I've heard so many times. But for as far down as I went, I've only come up that much higher. So like the worse it is, the better it is, honestly, because I really wouldn't change any of it at all.
right. So I look, I mean, I don't, wouldn't wish what you went through on anybody, but I'm glad that you were the one that made it through, because you are light to people. Part of the reason we get to keep our recovery is because we get to give it back. And I see you do that faithfully, and it's
Mm.
important. But we've had experiences in some of the areas that you and I have been asked to present on. It is the nature of healthcare and how they look at people like us. And my addiction stayed with alcohol. So I never really had any temptation. I think part of it was just too stinking cheap. The
Exactly.
bigger of a drunk I became, the cheaper my liquor got, but that I never turned to anything else. Like I sort of joke, my last charge, one of the most embarrassing parts about it is they itemized I drank Mr. Boston's in the arrest document. And I'm like, that's how bad it had gotten. I'm drinking just
Dirty.
I'm just drinking nasty sewage water. And sorry, Mr. Boston's, if whoever's like, but that's what
Noted.
and this guy's that bad. So because it was
Yeah.
under section, like they have miscellaneous, and then they have how big of a loser is this person, and then they put that stuff in. But
I can't talk. I was drinking Skulls and McCormick's vodka, so I'm just like, yeah.
there you go. So
Family.
there you go. So the thing is that uh we go so far down these roads, and they see us. Well, on my addiction with alcohol, I was just obnoxious with it in the ED. You know, they're like, oh, here he comes again. He's seeing things, hearing things. He's going through withdrawal. Give him some Ativan, and I guarantee within a half an hour he's going to leave AMA. And that was pretty much my shtick with the ED. I hear a different story with you and what you went through, and also similar people that have gone your same journey, same type of thing. They struggle in the emergency department. However, some of that stuff is triggered, and I'm curious what your perspective is on healthcare in general and what you've experienced related to then and now, and if there has been any changes in your view.
Yeah, so the whole just medical community is just a big part of my addiction and recovery process. But yeah, I mean, I think I was probably similar to you in the emergency department when I was drinking, just probably very belligerent, maybe screaming, and just I was, yeah, not, I was a lot of times in the suicide room. My last name was Beaversdorf, and so everyone knew it the second I came in, and they knew why I was there, and they were not pleasant for that part at all. And then it that continued just throughout, just any part of being in addiction and being in a hospital or a medical room. It is typically not good. They're not wanting to deal with you, or they're unequipped to be able to deal with your situation. The only bright side of it is coming out of it and not being addicted to something and going into the emergency room now is totally different. And I can share with them, okay, I have been off of drugs since this date, and they're very welcoming and very helpful and kind, but not so much during the process of they just kind of give you that look like, what are you doing to yourself? And I'm kind of
Yeah.
looking at them like, I don't know.
Right. And I think that's a balance where it's hard. Like I don't go at like even when we're doing those presentations like we did, it wasn't a matter of going after healthcare. And in the American College of Emergency
Mm.
Physicians, when we did that one, they were actually asking for what they can do better, because we have to acknowledge it's frustrating to deal with people like us when we're at our
All right.
worst. I was in
Yeah.
the rear, and I can only bet you. I mean,
I
you
know.
told me some stories. I'm thinking you were probably real difficult to deal with. So I know I was, but
Yeah.
so I don't blame them so much. But how does it get better? I can
Hmm.
tell you, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the other side, though. So one of the things you and I fight a lot is stigma. So we actually go out and our work with Shatterproof is to fight stigma. Um, what are you experiencing currently, having been somebody that once was and is now a person in recovery? What are you experiencing with the healthcare? Because you still have that chart.
Yeah, I definitely do. They're definitely, I think part of it is because my kind of stigma is on me right here on my hands, and then there's no medical professional that will not ask me what happened, because it's, and the no toes either. And so they're kind of like, how in the heck does that happen? It's not a common thing, even with drug addiction, really. And so they'll always ask me, and I'm honest with them. I tell them, hey, this is from drugs, and they're a lot more empathetic, and you can kind of see the, just like, oh, you're doing okay, and you're not you're pleasant to be around in this room. I think they instantly kind of went, oh, I thought you were going to be really crappy to me.
And that was your fingers and toes was all, if I remember, was part of an infection that you got that was unattended.
from from after the heart surgery, I was using drugs again.
Yeah.
And so the pig's valve can't hold up for on heroin and things. And so I went into a 10-day coma, and yeah, they found me abandoned, naked in a house, and just my fingers and toes were purple and black. And yeah, I woke up 10 days later, and then I lived with those. Just, they were necrotic. They were rotting off my body for about 4 months, and then they cut them off. So Yeah.
I want to touch on this for a minute, and this is for my audience because I have a mixed audience here. Not everybody that tunes in here has struggled with addiction. Most of the people that come here are either understanding that there's hope when things seem horrible, and that your high risk living is going to take you places that you can't imagine if you're not careful. And it just
Absolutely.
so. But your story, what the fact they found you alive is such a miracle in and of itself. Countless people that you and I both know in addiction, we've heard about them being found rolled up in carpets, found alongside the road, found in the back of a restaurant, tossed out of a car somewhere in a field, dead. And yet, you get out from this heart surgery, you start running and gunning with these same people again, and they find you naked in a house, dying.
Exactly.
And you walk away, you lose your fingers and toes as a result of it. You rose from that, but many don't. And so, one of the things I've been talking a lot about recently is the notion of prevention. I mean, for kids, when kids are doing this stuff, it absolutely can end up where you did. There are worse things.
Oh yeah.
There are times when you don't die. You know what I mean? Narcan isn't going to save your fingers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they and the I mean, I don't always share this just because it is kind of disturbing for some people, but I mean, I was the 3 days prior to the day that the ambulance came, the people I was staying with, I was telling them I was really sick. I mean, I was falling down, I couldn't walk. And then that I don't remember most of those 3 days. I remember pieces. And then a nurse, I found out in the ICU, she kind of just blurted it out and she's like, well, you were probably raped. And so I was kind of like, oh, wow. All right. Well, I can't talk. I can't do anything. I was intubated. And so there's that too. And it's just, there was just, you think those people are kind of your friends in that world too. You think someone's kind of got your back. No, they just leave you for dead. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a commodity for whatever their twisted mind is at that point. That is a horrible thing. I appreciate you sharing that with the audience because I think that there has to be some shock in this for kids to wake up. And you've dealt with this, had to deal with this for a long time, and probably still do. I don't know what the quietness of your head is, but the fact that you state it like you do tells me that this is something you've been managing for a while. And how you approached, I think, it's honest and it's brutal. I think it's where people need to understand. And I don't mind getting into more of your story on that. I really wanted to make sure that people knew that this is just not your. Oh yeah, I was. Everybody. I think we spend so much time on talking about Kensington, Skid Row, and everything else. We make it this place that's somewhere else. We don't
Exactly.
a person that's actually in your community.
Yeah, just the person you live next door to. I mean, it's there's not a look to any of this, and and I think just your personality, your outlook on things too will definitely can change that. Just that can change everything. It really does. And so if you just have a better outlook on where you're going, just being honestly grateful for what you have, and that always just changes your situation. It really does.
For sure. When you go into emergency settings now, people I would imagine treat you more fairly once they hear your tone. Because I think that one of the things I've noticed is that with loved ones of mine that actually try to get healthcare now, there's always like, oh yeah, sure, you're clean. I've heard that before. When clean since when? Tuesday? You know what I mean? That stuff that goes on all the time. But to hear you speaking about it, I think gives them a little bit of validity that you're doing okay. But are you running into any of that stuff now where you go in and get treatment and people are noticing your chart and you feel like maybe they're treating you a little differently?
I always constantly have that in the back of my mind. It's a constant, like, are they wondering if I'm here for pain meds? I constantly, am I really sick enough to be at the emergency room? Because I don't want to ever go if I can help it. But I question the validity of my own symptoms, and they haven't anyone hasn't openly been like just kind of giving me that look or been rude or anything, but for the most part I think I'm honest with them and they can see that and they're honest with me, and that just kind of really helps. That helps a lot. It really does.
You just said something actually not even in the medical side. I've called out and I've noticed it myself. I don't trust my judgment on just about anything. I've noticed that my faith, I have a faith in God, and I believe that's a big part of my journey. And I sometimes I find my faith shaken there because I questioned, are you even making the right decision there? I
Oh gosh.
look back at 50 years of decision making. I'm like, Are you sure?
How did I even get into the house today? How am I doing anything?
Exactly.
Hmm.
I'm dressed. This is
Yeah.
cool.
I have a dog, I have pets and children.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a miracle in of itself. So,
It is.
but yeah, we do question our own decisions. So I was curious how they treat you. I've heard different stories on that. But I guess some of the things that's important is like, what are some of your solutions right now? Addiction doesn't disappear. We can find our tools keep us safe and healthy and living good lives. But what are some of the solutions that work for you to keep you in this life that's working well for you? It seems to be anyway.
I think I share the faith card just like you do. Just God is the reason I made it through my entire everything every day of my life. And so that I really dove into my spirituality when I left rehab. I stayed at a safe house in Dallas for women in sex trafficking, but it was a faith-based house. And so I lived there for 7 months and was just kind of straight doing things like that. So that for me, uh, it kind of just swept in, and it where the negative thinking and just bad patterns, I could replace it with scripture. I could replace my life choices with going that way instead. And it just kind of meshed over really easily and nicely for me. And so anytime or just kind of being around other people I know that kind of know me well enough that if I just kind of can be around them, I know I'm kind of safe in a way without having to say anything.
Yeah, and I think that I one of the things with the God subject in recovery, a lot of people shun that because they say, well, if there is a God, why would he let this happen to me? And I hear the other side of it. It's like I heard something this week that was super powerful. There's a gentleman, I forget, it was just, I don't know if it was a setup conversation, whatever, but he was sitting in the car and he was talking to somebody next to him, and they were questioning his faith and why is God letting all this stuff happen to people? The whole thing, why does God let kids die and stuff like that? And his position was, you were born into sin. You were born into this
Mhm.
mess. He's trying to save you. The reason you're where you
Exactly.
are right now is he's trying to rescue you. You're the one drowning in the water and choosing to stay in there. The boat's right there. And for
Yeah.
me, I found that to be a powerful analogy as my faith gets shaken once in a while, based on any number of circumstances. Some maybe me just trying to control situations, and others just situations that break our hearts sometimes. So we
Right.
but it's not an evidence of whether he's present or not. It's an evidence of where I'm kind of thinking about things. You talked about
Right.
earlier.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's just having that relationship, but God wants us to have a relationship with each other and pray to God and things like that. So it's like whenever bad things like that happen and people always ask those questions, it's kind of like, where are we? Why aren't we doing these things? Why aren't we here for each other? Why aren't we helping each other and relying on God? That's the whole source. And so yeah, I know it's not easy for a lot of people to go, oh, I can jump on that faith wagon and just go, oh, my addiction's gone. But that really was what did it for me.
I hear you. Probably, I would have to say the same thing. I have said the same thing, so I still believe it to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Um, so you seem to be doing well in life right now, and so when that call of your addiction comes, sounds
Mhm.
like God's a big part of that. But is there any other work that you're doing right now, or people? So if you maybe how you've dealt with that call that comes, especially early on in our recovery, what comes of that for you? What are some of the tools you use?
Uh, Definitely having a support group of just somebody, someone that'll hold you accountable. I think that's a big part for me is being held accountable. Um, yeah, I think I don't know if it's my personality. I don't know if I'm intentionally doing it, but I feel like I will manipulate people into certain things and not know it. And so just a support group of people that you can be around that are like-minded and make you feel good and you can make them feel good. And I think that's important for me.
You just said something. You've been saying a lot of things that actually are convicting to me today. I brought you on here just as somebody that I respect, and I thought your story was powerful for people to touch base. But you're saying things that are convicting to me currently. I think one of the things that I tend to do, and others that I see in recovery as well that do, we're really good manipulators. And
Exactly.
and it's not like we're going out and saying, I'm gonna get your wallet,
Mm-mm.
we're good at it because that's how you survive. And I'm not saying that as a badge. I'm embarrassed by it.
Exactly.
I don't want to be that. But
Mm-mm.
I think that's also why we don't stay invested in a community. Like it's easy to be that dodgy person if I don't stay in this
Oh
group.
yeah.
This group because they offended me, and now I go to this group, and all of a sudden I'm king of the hill again. I walk in, all this powerful messaging, super energetic. Everybody's like, "Oh yeah, Captain Recovery's here," and then all of a sudden I'm like, "Ah, you're irritating me," and then I jet again. I'm not allowing myself to stay there where people know my tendencies. Being around people
Oh,
that know my
exactly.
tendencies keep me straight.
Oh, that's such a good, yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Cause yeah, cause they can call you on it and they just know. But it's great also that you can go be around people and not have to necessarily verbalize what you're doing that you know is wrong possibly,
Yeah.
but they just know and they can just kind of swoop in without a, yeah, that's a great way you put that.
Well, and I found the same thing with churches. I found a church that I stayed at for a long time. And it's because I choose to be same seat, same spot every week,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. And I do that just because I know my threshold for my boundaries that I won't run from.
Mhm.
I'm still there, so people know what's up. I still have that accountability, but I'm not
Oh
gonna
yeah.
I'm not so far in that it'll become a frustration for me. And I think those are things we all have to find our place. Um, are you currently working with are you working with any women's groups or anything like that? I know you're doing some shatterproof work and things like that. Is there anything else that you'd want to make people aware of to connect with?
I'm not doing I still ambassador with Shatterproof and then the University of Michigan. I think they did a few things, but I can't even remember what it was now.
Yeah, I
So
know they're doing something now. Again, they're doing another campaign that's just in Michigan.
yeah,
So,
I just didn't I couldn't remember what it was called and I just, yeah.
I don't remember either, but they just said something about they're doing a Michigan only campaign. So that's pretty interesting.
Yes,
Wish our other states would do it too.
exactly.
So we at one point in your life you weren't using substances. You probably had, some trauma building and some other things that may have got you there, but at some point you weren't using. Um, you know, there are young women out there with those same things going on. And, with all the isolation of the pandemic and everything that went on with that, um, the mental health state of teenagers and young people is tragically dysfunctional and troubling. I mean, you look at the mental health issues, and there was a stat that SAMHSA just published on the 2022 mental health state, and I forget what the exact numbers were, but there was an extraordinary number of major depressive events in kids 14 to 18, and many of them led to impairment. Like the vast majority of them led to impairment, but 97% of those kids in those events never sought treatment.
Oh
So
wow.
we got a bunch of isolated kids with mental health issues that never got help for it. So if rewinding all the way back to when it started, what's some advice you would have given to yourself then that might have helped steer it?
Definitely talking about it, issues, talking, being open, being honest, whatever's going on. Finding someone you can trust. If like, I had really good support life. I have parents, but I didn't go to them for everything. And we moved a couple times growing up, so it was hard for me to make friends really quickly. And I didn't have anyone I could really go to and share think just normal things, not just like major issues. I wasn't being like beat up or something. It was just normal teenage issues, and I wouldn't normally have someone to confide in. And had I can see a lot of issues, I would have had just if speaking to somebody like an adult, they could have just steered me slightly different. That would help.
Right. And I'm not sure that about in my life, I've never really changed course based on one person's opinion. Usually if I had to screw up and it was seeds that have been planted for me anyway. It's like somebody said something and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And I just go do my stupid stuff. And then somebody else would say the same thing. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that makes sense. He just said that. And I'm
But
like,
that's
oh,
cool. I'm still gonna keep going.
I keep going. And then
Yeah.
eventually I'm like sitting there, rock bottom, screeching halt, and somebody says the exact same thing they said, 10 years ago. I'm like, oh wow, that's the best thing I've ever heard in my life. But
Yeah, here we are. So you didn't make that many just bad decisions. So hey.
because because it seed of hope, people, there are faithful people that come to you where you're at and meet you right where you're at.
They do, and they're consistent and they don't give up on you. And that's a beautiful, amazing thing.
Yeah. So I just, I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to connect today. You know, I want it for my audience. I usually try to keep these a little bit shorter just because their attention span's real short on some of these. Uh, I mean, mine is too, but I want to make sure that we're keeping these a little shorter. And I want to
Yeah,
make sure that, you know, you have an opportunity to have a voice and you're welcome here anytime. I think that there's plenty more to your
thanks.
story we could get into. Is there anything that you want to make sure to shout out or something that we've missed in this conversation that you want to make sure gets said? Because I don't want to miss anything about that is important to you to say.
Oh, no, I'm good. I just, it's good to talk to you. It's good to see you. I always enjoy having a conversation. So I really appreciate you talking to me.
No, it's a pleasure. I'll probably ring you again at some point and see what we can do to get into some other world challenges. But
All right.
congratulations on your marriage. Is that you guys above?
Thank you.
Is that your picture?
Yeah.
You got one of those
Yeah.
cameras? That's cool.
It's a, yeah, it's big.
Those are great. The canvas things that you do. Is that what that is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for bearing with me on the technical issues too. For the audience,
Yeah.
a little different format that we had to do this time. Just couldn't figure out how to get the audio was acting a little wonky, so this was the best way to handle it. So,
I'm all
and
thumbs. That's what it was.
we're gonna do. And what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
For the audience, you know, guys, please ponder some of the stuff that Marissa's saying here because while her story is extraordinary and the things that happened to her are tragic, the issue is that it's not something that's out of the realm of possibility for you either. The journey that got her there was a series of compromises that ended up into a very serious situation that had all kinds of chaos. That basically that's what life looks like when you're in that chaos. One chaotic decision after another to make one more day just work out. And so if you find yourself starting to slip in that road, don't think you have it all together. As I've said on the show so many times, your high risk living has unintended consequences. There's unforeseen circumstances that can come up. Pause, listen to the advice that's there around you, and at least reconsider where you're at to course correct before it gets this far. And if you are in a situation, you found things collapsed and you're watching this today, or somebody's forwarded it to you, there is hope. Connect with people like Marissa and I. We'll do everything we possibly can to share with you that there is a possibility to rise from it. And from now until the next time we talk, please, by all means, stay out of trouble.
Okay.